In 1999, if you wanted to buy a computer in America, there was a good chance you drove to a building the size of a grocery store with 5,000 different products under one roof and a name printed in giant letters across the front: CompUSA. That year, the company posted $6.3 billion in sales, over 200 superstores in 84 major cities. A Mexican billionaire had just paid $800 million to own it outright. 8 years later, it was worth so little that its owners didn't even bother filing for bankruptcy. They just sold it to a liquidation company and let it be quietly taken apart. No dramatic scandal, no criminal trial, no single villain. Just a company that built an entire retail category from nothing and then watched that category stop needing it. Today, the CompUSA name is a broken link and a punchline about outdated web design. This is the story of CompUSA, the superstore that taught an entire generation of Americans what a personal computer even was, and got erased by exactly how well that lesson landed.
Welcome back to Boardroom Ruins, where we dig into the companies that built entire industries and then watched those industries move on without them. If you've been here before, you know how this goes. No fluff, no filler. Just the real decisions, the real numbers, and the real moments where it all started to come apart. If you're new, consider this your warning. Once you start seeing how these collapses actually happen, you start noticing the same patterns everywhere. Hit subscribe now because you're going to want to see the next one. All right, back to CompUSA.
The story starts in 1984 in Addison, Texas, a quiet suburb north of Dallas. Not under the CompUSA name at all, but as a company called Soft Warehouse. Soft Warehouse began by selling software and hardware directly to business customers. Within about a year, under an executive named Nathan Morton, the company opened its first physical retail store, and Morton had a bigger idea brewing. Instead of a modest specialty computer shop, the kind that existed all over the country at the time, cramped and expensive, why not build something enormous? A genuine superstore, complete product lines, aggressive pricing, everything a customer could possibly need for a computer under one massive roof. The first true superstore opened in 1988. It worked immediately. By 1991, right as the phrase personal computing was becoming a genuine mainstream idea for the first time in American households, the company fully rebranded to the name that would define an era: CompUSA. Walking into a CompUSA in its prime meant walking into roughly 25,000 square feet of retail space, stocked with more than 5,000 distinct products. Full desktop computers and laptops, software wall-to-wall, printers, monitors, modems, cables, peripherals of every kind. The company even sold build-to-order custom PCs through its own house brand, assembled to a customer's exact specs. But CompUSA wasn't just a store. It functioned almost like a full-service computing department. In-house repair, technical support desks, dedicated training centers where customers could actually learn to use the software they just bought, direct sales relationships with corporations, schools, and government agencies, on top of the walk-in retail business. For an entire decade, this was, for millions of Americans, simply the default answer to where do I go to buy a computer. Not a niche destination, the obvious one. Growth through the 1990s was fast, and for a long stretch, genuinely dominant. CompUSA went public in 1991. By mid-1996, the chain had reached 105 stores. Then, in 1998, CompUSA made its most aggressive move yet, acquiring Computer City, one of its biggest direct rivals, and at the time, a sister company to Radio Shack. It was a straightforward, brutal move. Buy out a major competitor, absorb its store footprint, and eliminate a rival in one stroke. It worked. By the height of its power in the late 1990s, CompUSA was operating in more than 200 superstores across 84 major metropolitan markets, pulling in $6.32 billion in annual sales in 1999 alone. This wasn't just a successful retailer. For a moment, This was arguably the single most powerful physical retail brand in American personal computing. That same peak year hid a warning sign almost nobody outside the company was paying attention to. CompUSA had already posted an operating loss of $54.2 million in June 1999, even while headline sales numbers looked stronger than ever. In February 2000, Grupo Sanbres, the retail arm of Carlos Slim's business empire, Grupo Carso, one of the largest conglomerates in Mexico, acquired CompUSA outright for approximately $800 million, taking it fully private. New ownership brought a complete overhaul of management and operations, and for a couple of years, the company appeared to stabilize. But the real problem sitting underneath CompUSA was never really a management problem. It was a positioning problem, and no management team was going to out-strategize it. Later industry analysts would describe the issue almost too precisely. Picture the computer section of a modern Best Buy expanded to fill an entire warehouse-sized building, but without the specialty hobbyist components, the individual motherboards and processors that dedicated parts retailers carried. CompUSA occupied an increasingly narrow, increasingly uncomfortable middle ground. Bigger than a specialty shop, not as broad or as cheap as what was coming next. And what was coming next hit from two directions at once. Best Buy kept aggressively expanding its own computer and electronic sections, matching CompUSA's selection while offering a far broader range of other products in the same store. Meanwhile, online retail, Amazon, and increasingly Newegg, a company built specifically around the hobbyist PC parts market CompUSA had never fully served, began undercutting CompUSA price with none of the overhead of running 200-plus physical superstores. CompUSA was squeezed from both sides simultaneously, outmatched on selection by bigger box stores, undercut on price by leaner online ones, and leadership instability made an already difficult fight worse. The company burned through a rapid succession of CEOs after the 2000 acquisition: Hal Compton, Larry Maudry, Tony Weiss, none of them staying long enough to actually execute a real strategic turnaround. As a small guy without a lot of buying power, there was just no way for CompUSA to compete. One industry analyst put it, bluntly and accurately, as the company's position kept eroding through the mid-2000s. By 2007, the numbers had become impossible to spin. In March, CompUSA announced it would close 126 of its 229 stores, more than half its entire footprint, in a last attempt to survive around a smaller base of 103 locations. It didn't work. For the third quarter of 2007 alone, the company reported a net loss of $45.7 million on revenue of roughly $425 million, proof the smaller footprint hadn't fixed anything fundamental. On December 7, 2007, CompUSA's owners sold the company's remaining assets to Gordon Brothers Group, a firm that specializes specifically in retail liquidations, essentially the industry's professional undertaker. Most of the remaining 103 stores shut down for good in early 2008. 16 locations, along with the CompUSA brand name, trademarks, e-commerce operations, and technical services division, were bought on January 6, 2008 by Systemax, the parent company of Tiger Direct, a chain we've already covered on this channel, and a company that had built part of its own business specifically around acquiring the dying remnants of failed competitors.
To its credit, Systemax didn't just liquidate the CompUSA name. It tried a genuine revival. Executives converted additional Tiger Direct stores to the CompUSA brand and publicly promoted something they called Retail 2.0. Internet-connected screens throughout the store, letting customers compare prices online in real time while physically shopping the aisles. On paper, it was a clever idea, addressing the exact problem that had been quietly killing CompUSA for a decade: customers leaving to buy the same product cheaper online. In practice, it solved nothing. Giving a customer the ability to browse the internet inside your store doesn't help much if the prices they find on that screen aren't actually competitive with the retailers selling them the exact same product from a warehouse instead of a storefront. The revival never gained real traction. Physical CompUSA locations kept closing, one by one, through the following years. On November 2, 2012, Systemax announced it was dropping the CompUSA name entirely, along with Circuit Cities, another dead brand it had acquired, consolidating everything into the Tiger Direct brand and website instead. The CompUSA name would technically flicker back into existence more than once in later years, under different owners, as little more than a dormant, barely functioning website. A ghost wearing the logo of what used to be one of the most powerful retail brands in the country. So what actually happened to CompUSA? This one's genuinely rare in this catalog.
No single scandal, no fraud trial, no one catastrophic decision you can point to as the moment it all went wrong. CompUSA didn't die from a wound. It died from a position that simply stopped existing. And there's a real irony worth sitting with. CompUSA didn't fail because personal computing failed. It failed, in large part, because personal computing succeeded completely. Because CompUSA itself helped teach an entire generation of Americans that a computer was a normal mainstream household purchase, not a specialty item for engineers and hobbyists. Once that lesson was fully learned, computers became commodities, interchangeable, price comparable, purchasable from literally anywhere, with no reason left to specifically need a 25,000 square foot warehouse to buy one. CompUSA built the category from a single store in a Dallas suburb. Then the category it built grew up and simply stopped needing CompUSA at all. The chain that once operated 200-plus superstores across the country now survives mostly as a broken web link and a specific, oddly universal memory for anyone who grew up in the 90s, wandering the PC game aisle, staring at oversized cardboard boxes, back when buying a computer still felt like a genuine event, instead of a 2-day delivery you barely think about. If this one interested you, we've also covered Tiger Direct, the company that eventually bought what was left of CompUSA's name, tried to revive it, and later disappeared itself the exact same way. Subscribe so you don't miss what's next.